Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got a full house. Welcome, Mac, joining me tonight,
Good evening.
and Gio.
What is good, everyone?
Now that the international break is over, we're going to give you guys our takes on what we saw this past week, week and a half, and we're also going to be previewing the upcoming Premier League games this weekend. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys and want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. All right, let's get straight into some of the international fixtures that took place, and it's going to be open-ended. I'm going to start off with something that interested me, and that is Spain. And not necessarily the results or sort of the big, not necessarily the results, but some players that stood out to me, of course. Spain did lose to Colombia 1-0 and tied Brazil 3-3. But of course, one of the big talking points is Lamine Yamal. I'm sure you guys have seen some compilations of some skill moves, but I think it's crazy that he, of course, had a big part to play in that first goal for Spain against Brazil. And it looks like at this point, nailed on starter for Spain at likely I think he's 16 or 17 years old, which is pretty crazy to me. And then on the opposite end, they do have Williams, who has garnered a lot of attention in other leagues out of La Liga. So I'm excited to see that sort of duo there. But their games and the results weren't really didn't really stand out too much. And you can't really look into it too much, I guess, because it is friendly. But yeah, just wanted to point that out. That stood out to me. But I guess I'll open it to you, Gio. Anything else stand out to you from this past week, week and a half of international fixtures?
I hate to toot Max horn, but England's ability to come back. They just look overall stronger as a team. I think their midfield has gone exponentially stronger. Not to say, England's midfield hasn't been strong before. They've had a plethora of great players go through that midfield. But I think the team has just become more cohesive in a sense. I think, like much of the interviews we've watched of the older players, is that they were still so invested into their club side that they still had somewhat a little bit of hate for each other, even when they were playing for their international sides. Which, it doesn't seem like this is the case here. We see players that, dap each other up during the game, even if it's a rival matchup. If you're from the same country and you've been teammates before, they seem to be very friendly with one another. So I think that is the biggest difference with England going forward. I think everybody's just very bought in and ready to win and kind of write off all those naysayers that think, that England just can't seem to win an international title. But apart from that, obviously, um, Kylian Mbappe, killing it as always. But we'll get into that a little later.
Mac, then let me hear you cook. England?
No, I'm going to go positive, negative, and since we're on a positive trend, I'm going to go start off with, of course, who right now are in the odds makers for the Euros for 2024, actually in third place, behind, shockingly, I know England are first, France are second. It would be Germany. For me, they think this is a great international break. And I think this is one of the few times when I'm looking at that German international team, you look at it, the spine of it isn't really from Bayern Munich. And I would argue the starting 11 for Germany are actually better than the starting 11 for Bayern Munich as of today. You're talking about Rudiger, Tah, Havertz, Wirtz, Gundogan, all starting for Germany against Netherlands, against one of their other, I would say, rivals in contention for who should be that third favorite team for the Euros. They fit along right in there, played well, won both of their games over the break, and of course beating France along the way as well. So in terms of who would be, I wouldn't classify them as a dark horse, but who in that, if we were to tier list out who are the odds on to be able to potentially win the Euros, I think that the odds makers have it on point. It should be England, France, in between themselves, they have the two most talented squad. But if there's a third team to potentially win it, I would not be surprised if it would be Germany. So positive, great for them, great for them to see that they're able to kind of, again, not just be the Bayern Munich team of old and have a little different, a bit of flavor, different attacking options than you would have historically seen them. On the other side of the coin, negative, I'm actually going to go with Portugal. In their most recent game against Slovenia, against a team that has a plus 4,000 odds to win the Euros, they lost 2-0. So even though in that recent matchup they weren't playing a lot of their best players, Bernardo Silva didn't feature, Bruno Fernandes didn't feature, players like that. For me, in that tier of who should be the next up behind England and France, Portugal, I believe, have the talent. If you just look at the names, they've been through tournament over tournament since they won the Euros previously. So if you look at that talent, they should be in contention in that next tier. But they always seem to play below expectations, in my opinion. So I think it's a worrying sign. They did beat Sweden. Again, they play two teams that are well below, I would argue, their level. Beat the better team, lost to the worst team, seem very inconsistent. So going into the tournament, it's still a little bit of way out. And again, they didn't play, I would argue, in terms of who started against Slovenia, maybe 3 or 4 people are good players are going to actually be in the starting 11 of the first game. So don't want to take too many takeaways, but how consistently inconsistent they have been on the international level for quite some time leaves me coming out of this break a little bit concerned for them.
Okay, we've heard from a number of different teams. I guess I'll point out another team that maybe we haven't heard about or talked about, and that would be the Netherlands. They did beat Scotland 4-0 and also lost to Germany 2-1. And I think in the tier below your Portugal, your Germany, Netherlands, I would even put them with Spain in the fact that when they're good, they could be really, really good. But it just right now, both teams are not, I think, settled, and coaches, I think, are still gonna try. Respective coaches are still gonna try to figure out what the best squad will be. Of course, in the first day of the Euros and the first game. So I'm interested to see what that would look like because in the game against Germany, they did play Daniel Malen and Memphis Depay. That's Netherlands. They ended up losing 2-1, but that's a very dynamic two up front. And Xavi Simons didn't play as much in the second game, but he did play in the first game. And so I'm interested to see what that would look like because we know defensively Virgil van Dijk, Nathan Ake, Matthijs de Ligt, very, very good partnership in between all three of them, very capable center backs. In front of them, you could have a decent midfield that could anchor and hold those positions. And I'm interested to see if they'll pull a I guess, for lack of better team to compare them to, in Italy, where they'll sit back really deep and try to hit teams on the break with that dynamic front three that they have. So I'm interested to see that and how that plays out for the Netherlands. But I guess I'll open it up to you, Gio, again. Anything else that stood out to you? Anything you want to lock in for the Euros now and sort of look back and hopefully point out that you were right at this point a couple months before the Euros. Anything else that stood out from this international break?
Obviously, I would like to side with France. I think they have still met have still hit their peak. I think overall, I think they will go with the right team. I think they arguably, it's obviously tough to say, a team this good can say they have a chip on their shoulder. I think they'll feel hard done from the World Cup and feel like they missed a huge opportunity there. And I think they're still very hungry for more in that sense. So going into the Euros, I think they will have a little chip on their shoulder and want to come out and prove a lot of people wrong that they are probably the most dominant team in the world at this point. But they'll have to prove it in the Euro stage for the time being. Mbappe, obviously, by that time should be signed and sealed as a Real Madrid player. So hopefully that will be fun times for him, and maybe some more hat tricks in finals for him. But I just also want to shout out Endrick. He had a decent. I'm not saying great. Relax, Mac. I see you shaking your head. He had a decent international break. Him playing at playing in England for I think one of the first times, and being able to score a goal Great for his young career, his young international career as well. Love to see it as, again, fanboying Real Madrid here. He is a future Real Madrid player. I won't say star. I won't say star, Mac. Don't worry. Player.
That's what I'm worried about because the conversation immediately goes Endrick for Yamin Lamal. People need to stop. This is potentially be like the conversations where like Odegaard versus Ansu Fati. What are we doing here? Like the expectation you're heaping on like people generally, not saying you, Gio, generally people online are heaping on 17, 16-year-olds is a little ridiculous. I understand. Okay, yeah, like I think the stat I saw is where players to score their first 2 goals for Brazil under the age of 18 in two consecutive games. It's him and Pele. You know, you can fine tune so many different stats where in any type of market where you can look at, based off this smaller and smaller bracket we put people in, you can say what you want, you know? So I'm a little bit concerned about the hype. People definitely need to kind of calm down, take a breather, relax, allow these kids to mature into men. And hopefully they get the opportunity to be able to do that on the international stage, respectively, club stage especially, which I'm actually concerned about both of them on the club stage. How do either of these young players potentially break out into a consistent starting 11 position, especially if Real Madrid sign Mbappe? What happens with Endrick there? Probably on loan. What does that look like? What team does he go to? Lamine Yamal, Barca are so much of a mess. Maybe they have no choice but to play him. Again, I'm very concerned where of all this pressure is heaped onto the young players, you may see them crumble from it. So hopefully it works out. Again, hopefully it works out. Not saying that they won't be good, but I feel the conversation is, or after one international break, has already got to the point of overinflation. And not just in those young stars. There's a lot of people that we definitely talked to that are getting an earful of old Kobe Manu. He won man of the match in an England international game. Fantastic. He should be starting. He's better than Phil Foden already today. No. People need to calm the hell down, take a deep breath. This is not kind of what you're doing, essentially building up a player in a span of a couple of days to then watch them crumble based off the pressure you apply. Understand? It's football. We like to get excited. We're fans. But at the end of the day, I think they're not just being detrimental themselves as fans. They're being detrimental to the player. So a little bit concerned. Take a chill pill, everyone.
I do want to just quickly mention, though, that yes, I completely agree with what you're saying there, Mac, but it is great to have that off your back for both Lamine Yamal and Endrick. Lamine Yamal, of course, playing very, very well against Brazil. I'm not sure if you guys watched some of the goals, but Olmo and Lamine Yamal look like Brazilian players, the way they were sort of dancing around the players to first Lamine Yamal get the penalty for the first goal, and then Olmo for the second goal. I think he even megged one of the defenders before putting that in the top corner. So that's great for Lamine Yamal. And then for Endrick, even though he only came off the bench and scored both games, he's already scored at the Bernabeu with Brazil. So that's kind of the monkey off his back. That's something that he can, moving forward. Of course, there's going to be a lot of expectation, but you've already scored for your international club. So that's something that you don't have to worry about. And the pressure, I think, won't be as high there if, of course, other players perform around him. But I guess on that note, I did want to quickly touch on, and maybe Mac, you have a little bit more thoughts on this, the England performances against Brazil, and then, of course, coming back to tie Belgium, where I'm a little disappointed that, of course, the result against a very weakened Brazil, I would say, didn't favor England. Their game on Saturday, though these are still just friendlies. But I'm glad that, like Gio mentioned, they were able to turn it around and come back and actually tie the game against Belgium. So and looked very much on the front foot, trying to create all the problems they could, and of course Phil Foden playing a vital role in that. So I'm excited to see what that is. But I guess quickly your thoughts on England, Max, since I don't think I've heard too much from you so far.
I think England, you get it kind of at TBD and incomplete in a lot of ways, because if you look at the starting lineups they played across both games, I felt like you're talking about heavy rotation. Is Anthony Gordon really going to be starting for the Euros for England? Probably not. Ollie Watkins, no. Conor Gallagher, no. Ben Chilwell, probably not. Like you're talking about and those are key replacements potentially coming in with the likes of Harry Kane missing, and what you may do in the midfield. The only thing I would necessarily leaves me cause for concern is that I don't necessarily, alongside Kane, see Jude Bellingham as that more so traditional 10, where is he really going to dance in the pockets, find space, link passes to be able to put on runners through? I don't see that as his natural kind of, it's more about his late runs into the box, his timing, his competitiveness, his control and discipline. I think that's more his, I would argue he's more of an 8 versus, let's say, in comparison to Kevin De Bruyne or even an Odegaard that we see a lot in the Premier League, where they're trying to be able to create those opportunities. So I'm a little bit worried about him in that position where he's been given the number 10 shirt, he's playing in the number 10 position, and that's what he's expected to do. I don't think that's going to be as successful as maybe some England fans are hoping for, and that would be my only cause of concern, aside from all the rotations that's happened over the course of the international break, where that's probably not what he's best at. And why, again, I argue is that the best player for England in that position is someone that never plays in that position for England, and that's Phil Foden, who actually played on the wing for both games, which, again, I think that's his ideal position. Have Bellingham back playing as an 8 alongside Declan Rice. We saw Bellingham do that with Borussia Dortmund to phenomenal degrees, phenomenal level. There isn't, just because now, yes, he's a late run to the box for Brazil, oh, he has to play as a number 10 down now. Or in all likelihood, if you look at how he plays for Brazil, how he plays for Real Madrid, in terms of that late run into the box in that 10 position, Kane's already trying to do the exact same thing anyway. So it's just a duplication for me, which doesn't make sense. So I'm very concerned about that. He has the qualities to be able to do it. I think do anything on the football pitch that any player could ever dream of. Believe in his talent, but I don't think that's the best usage of his talent for this team. So a little bit concerned about that, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, and just quickly before we wrap up this part, then Gio, I know of course you would have been keeping an eye out on the Portugal results. Mac mentioned they did beat Sweden, but they did lose. I think it was Slovenia just yesterday. They're recording. Cristiano Ronaldo did play full 90 last game, and so 39 years old, of course, pushing almost 40 years old. This likely his last international tournament. Just quick thoughts on that. Of course, it would be great if Portugal can win the Euros, and then he could win another Euros with this Portugal team. But I guess what are your what do you think about their chances in the upcoming tournament?
Like Max said, I think they are the sort of the team that's we often dub in every one of these tournaments, or we dub a team, or we give this team this title. It's the team that plays to the opponent's level. Kind of like how Chelsea does, kind of like how Man U does. They're kind of they kind of have that syndrome in them right now. You know, who's to say that they can't break out of it? I absolutely believe they have the talent to do so, but it's whether or not, say, the new manager is able to select the correct lineup. I know, there's this constant stigma of, oh, Ronaldo is, the heart and blood of Portugal. He's done so much for on the international stage for them. He means so much to the country, but is he always the right guy to start to play 90 minutes? No, I don't think so. What if Rafael Leao is lazy, is not tracking back? He's struggling offensively. Do you continue to start him? I think it's making those key decisions and making sure that the team understands that you may be considered great at your clubs and great around the world, but this is a team game, and I need everybody to lock in and to understand that we want to challenge the best teams in Europe, at least, to win this title again, which they have done in the past. So, you can't necessarily write them off because, they've had a couple of rough games here and there.
Okay, well, this, of course, wraps up our international talk. We're not going to dive too much into it because, of course, the Euros are still a couple months away, and we're going to definitely talk more about that when the time comes. So let's take a quick break here, guys, and then we'll be back covering some Premier League action taking place this weekend. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to Hustle Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now discussing some Premier League action taking place this weekend. Of course, the Premier League is back, and what a better game to come back to than the big one on Sunday. Man City are hosting Arsenal, Mac, and pretty much I put it down as a title decider. Not necessarily a title decider, but I think whoever wins here puts themselves in sort of the best position to sort of win the title. So neither team will be looking, of course, to lose. Both teams will be trying to get all 3 points, and of course, take all 3 points from the other team. So all to play for. The first game between these two clubs was a 1-0 win from Arsenal. A game I think they were well-deserved winners on that day. But what do you think this game will throw up for us this time around, Mac? At the Etihad, of course.
It's like a very tight, contentious, slow-paced game. Slow-paced game. If you look at the two previous matchups, and to specifically to kind of pick out their previous matchup in the Premier League and the Community Shield, we didn't see a high-flying game. It's where both teams were fighting control of the ball, control to be able to dictate possession, and neither team really were able to kind of be that. I would say that much better than the other to kind of dictate play, control possession, create the opportunities that they're looking to do. Because it's very much, in some ways, where they do the exact same thing and very much so cancel each other out. I think the individual differences that could happen are those individual battles where if one player has a poor game versus someone in the opposite position has a very good game, and there's those battles all across the pitch. We're talking about William Saliba versus Erling Haaland. You're talking about like Havertz versus Ruben Diaz. Even in the midfield, maybe Declan Rice being able to kind of out dominate Rodri in the midfield. I think arguably terms of levels have those players that played thus far this season. They've been on par. So who has that better day, I think, will be the difference, or who makes that one fewer mistake, which is what happened in the Arsenal game, as well as in the the Arsenal win at the Emirates, as well as the Community Shield. So I think we're going to get a very similar type of game as what we previously saw. I think I do want to highlight just a couple aspects of this. I don't think that this will be a title decider. I think this will be pivotal. And I think the only, major takeaway that we could have is if Arsenal do win this game, this moves them 4 points above City, as well as, and all that means that there'll be even more of a higher position in terms of goal difference. So it's really 5 points that they theoretically would have them if they do win this game. So I think if they do, they should feel very confident with 9 games remaining that they should go on to win the title, because this is where the downfall last year happened for a lot of this Arsenal team. I think that's the least likely result. I think we'd all generally agree with that. But I think if Arsenal are to win, the matchup I've been looking at the most is Bukayo Saka versus Nathan Ake. In the previous matchups against City, Saka has gotten a lot of stick from Arsenal fans, non-Arsenal fans for his performance, because he really hasn't found a way to stand himself out that he does against a lot of the other teams in the Premier League. And I think a lot of that has to do with Ake. If you look at how many times Ake's been dribbled by thus far this season, it's only been 5. Defensively, he's very, very sound one-on-one defender, and that's where Saka really cooks, where they're able to get in position in the final third, having those passes, those overlaps with Ben White or Odegaard, and try to isolate Saka against a one-on-one defender. But Ake has been exceptional in that position, where he's able to deny Saka getting onto his left foot, and when he does getting on the right, still make sure that there isn't as many opportunities to cross the ball into the box. So I think that could potentially be a separator, where if Saka has that better game than Ake and is able to, instead of maybe beat him the couple of times to create opportunities for himself or his teammates, that's where Arsenal then have a much better chance to at least pick up a point, if not win the game.
Okay, well, of course, we're going to talk about how that will play out, but I want to read out some stats here, Gio. City, of course, won against Newcastle in the last time out in the Premier League before the international break, and then Arsenal left it late to beat Brentford at their home at the Etihad last game out as well before the break. Some key players that might be missing. Well, Ederson will miss the game for Man City, but Kevin De Bruyne, Kyle Walker, and John Stones are maybes. Whereas it looks like Martinelli might not make it back for this game, but Gabriel Jesus coming back to his old club. Kai Havertz looking likely to start at that number 9 position, pretty much his now. Does this have any impact on how this game will play out? Gio, what are your thoughts?
I wouldn't say so. I think even if Arsenal is coming in with a bit of injuries, I think their bench has kind of shown that they're able to step in, score key goals, make key tackles. I think again, you're talking about Pep's protege. I think he has been marked this game on his calendar for quite some time now. Knowing how close it is, knowing how close the title race is, I think he already has his sort of plan in place, and it's now just down for them to execute. Again, a lot of these guys on both sides have had quite decent international breaks. They're coming back in, I would say, fine form. And they're gonna play as they normally play. This is gonna be, I believe, a low scoring affair. It's gonna be very tactical. Again, like Mac mentioned, it's gonna come down to the fewest mistakes, and I think the first goal will come from the team. Will come from the team who makes the first mistake. So how are Arsenal really going to play this? They will be quite happy with a draw. But I think them being top of the table right now, I think they need to come in and play. I wouldn't say more conservative, but it has to be a little bit more conservative. I know they kind of have to be careful with their chances because of how flexible Man City are in terms of being able to hit on the counterattack. They do have the pace there, and they have typically played that dump and run with Erling Haaland, so they have to be very careful of how high they want to push. How hard they want to test Ederson. So it's going to be very important that they don't do too much in this game, and still be very content with a draw if the opportunity is there for a draw.
Okay, yeah. I mean, let's talk about what that would look like. Well, I do agree. A tie for Arsenal at this point would not be the worst result. Whereas I think Man City definitely need the win here. They're back in points and goal difference, and of course, to win and take points away from Arsenal is without a doubt their intention this weekend. I did want to, I guess, highlight. I know Mackie already mentioned Saka versus Nathan Ake. That might be an interesting one. Of course, we have. Will Kevin De Bruyne pull a magical game, and then would Haaland score his signature style goal where he just powers through the defense? But of course, they have Arsenal do have a very comfortable back pair of Gabriel and Saliba, so that's going to be very interesting to see what that will look like. My question is, or what I'm looking out for, is actually the battle of the quote unquote tens from these two clubs. And I'm not talking about Kevin De Bruyne and for Man City. I'm talking about the guy that we spoke with in part A, and that's Phil Foden. I'm excited to see what that would look like. All the attention is going to be, of course, on Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne for Man City, and I think rightly so on Saka for Arsenal. But I think it's very important to see how Declan Rice and Rodri, definitely both the best defensive midfielders in the Premier League, will deal with Foden and Odegaard respectively. Because, of course, with that much attention against on the star players on the other team, if you have Foden picking up spaces in behind Jorginho if he plays, Partey if he plays, or Declan Rice, how important will that space be, and then how much of an effect can he have? And then on the flip side, if Saka's sort of dragging two defenders over, Rodri's out of space, can Odegaard find himself enough space to create something and make a goal for himself and or another team member? I think it's fair to say now Havertz is nailed on that number 9 spot for himself. So it's interesting to see who will start on the left-hand side. Will it be Trossard, who has been starting a lot there, or will it be Gabriel Jesus, who of course is now back from injury, and against his old club might be looking to inflict some pain there. Another spot that might be interesting would be the left back position for Arsenal. They've been playing QR, but I think Zinchenko's back now. He played for Ukraine in the international break. But also, Mac, you mentioned Tomiyasu has been playing as well in some friendlies over the break. So I guess, Mac, walk us through maybe some of those key spots that you be looking out for Arsenal's team selection.
I think the left back, is a interesting one because QVR has been playing more recently. I would still argue one-on-one defensively, he isn't as sound as some of the other Arsenal players, let's say even on the other side for Ben White. But I would argue I would think Man City's least, I would say, offensive position where necessarily you're going to drive out a player one-on-one. On the other side of the pitch, you either have a Doku or a Grealish who, in most cases, feel comfortable potentially taking their man one-on-one. And I think Ben White should more than suffice in that area. But how QVR does and I think will end up happening, Foden very much may start on the right wing or Bernardo Silva. So how that matchup plays out, maybe I put him into one positions, I think could be up to be very beneficial for Man City and potentially expose him, because I do anticipate him to start. The one I'm always going to come back to, and you may say some sort of bias, but I'm going to go back to the Community Shield, is the Jorginho position for Arsenal, where if Partey does start there in a midfield two of Declan Rice Partey with two center backs of William Saliba and Gabriel, I would argue that's as good of a back, let's say, middle of the pitch four in the Premier League as you can get as of right now. And to show that, even though you're looking at the offensive talent that Man City's had, Erling Haaland in his two previous matchups against Arsenal didn't record a single shot on target. And that's because you're looking at a solid defense of those four where he doesn't get the ability to run onto it. And one of the big highlights that everyone talked about at the moment during that game against Man City at the Emirates was when Haaland was trying to make his classic run and Saliba just body checked them out of the way. There's very few Premier League defenders currently that are able to do that and match pace with them at the same time. So I think their ability to constrict the pitch, and I would argue Jorginho is probably a little bit too soft. not a little bit. He's very too soft to play in that position. There's no question about it. So if you're adding Partey there instead, I think I personally would feel a little bit more comfortable and safe in some ways, at least on the pitch. But again, we'll see how that matchup potentially could work out and if Partey does get onto the field. The left wing position, I know we're going one by one through positions. I think Havertz are starting. Jesus coming off the bench. I don't think there's any question about that. And if Arsenal down a goal, I think that's the rotation they'll make. Take off the defensive midfielder, if it were Jorginho or Partey, to throw Jesus on and move Havertz back into midfield. The left wing position is really either Trossard or if Martinelli's healthy. If Martinelli is not healthy, I think that's a huge favor for Man City, because then that the right back position can bomb on. Because Trossard's great, I feel like, against, a middle of the table Premier League team and bottom half down, but he doesn't have to pace on that counter, which you can potentially expose even if Kyle Walker's not there, team on the break where Martinelli's able to get at if it's Stones in that position or Ruben Diaz in that position, and he'll probably cook them and not worry about Walker tracking back. Whereas I don't think Trossard has that in his locker. I think that will be, of course, we won't know until the starting lineups do come out. But if Martinelli isn't playing, that's a big loss for Arsenal. If he is, I think that's another kind of tool in their tool belt to get at this Man City team in transition, which I think if they are going to score, it won't be from control. It will be from those moments.
Okay, well, I think we've talked enough about what could potentially happen. And so, Gio, I'm going to quickly toss it to you. Give us a quick prediction. I know you're in a hot seat now, but give us a quick prediction on what you expect the final score to be. And then, of course, Mac and I will do the same.
I want to say 1-0 City. I think it's going to be a very tight game. I think City just overall in these big pressure games have come out victors, and I think Arsenal again will feel that pinch, feel that pressure. I know their bench is very capable, but I think through the span of things in the 90 minutes, City, the way they will be able to possess the ball, and when they do possess the ball, Arsenal will just be very, very wary, and then they will grow impatient and make that mistake. That would be costly. So I will say Man City 1-0 win and jump to the top of the table.
Oh, big shout there. I am gonna go with a similar prediction, but not a Man City win. I think it's gonna be a tie. I'm expecting a 1-1 tie. I think both teams are definitely very capable of scoring. You guys did say, though, it's going to be a low-scoring game, so that's kind of where my prediction lies. I just think with Haaland and the firepower behind him, you expect a City goal. But also on the flip side, the way Arsenal scored their winner against City, the way Havertz was sort of stretching the play, Tomiyasu came on and actually got the knockdown there, actually. But the way they can sort of change things up will leave City exposed, and I think Arsenal, the way they've been scoring, the best goal difference in the Premier League, will not be held out. So I think a game where both teams score is very likely, and I think it's going to end up in a tie. But lastly, Mac, what's your prediction?
I'm going to go for a 0-0 tie. I don't think anything happens in this game. I think, even though I want it to be a good game, I think it's going to be a painfully boring game where people are just going to be sitting on their edge for someone to make a mistake. No one's going to make a mistake. No one's going to take a risk. No one wants to lose. Because I think if you do lose, you do set yourself back. It's not a title decider, but you do set yourself back where you start to have to climb back up the ranks. Versus if both teams walk away with the point, I would argue all the teams around them, Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, they're not going to win out the rest of their fixtures. There is going to be more twists and turns in this title race. So I think their goal is to just not lose this game. So I'm going to go with the 0-0 tie.
Okay, well, we'll definitely keep an eye out on that, but let's quickly preview 2 other games before we wrap up for today. The next game we're going to preview actually is Newcastle versus West Ham. Now, these 2 teams comfortably mid-table, and out of any other sort of weekend, you wouldn't really pick them out, but I thought we discussed them, Gio. Newcastle are currently in 10th, West Ham are in 7th. The first game between these 2 teams ended as a 2-2 tie at the London Stadium. And of course, Newcastle just come off a loss against City before the break, whereas West Ham drew against Aston Villa but should have won. Now, the interesting part for me is that West Ham are 3 points off Man United, having played an extra game, and look like they have a pretty healthy squad. And so could this be the game where Calvin Phillips makes himself, the star of the show, considering he was just omitted from the squad for the past international break for England. And of course, Newcastle haven't had the best run of form in the last couple of weeks, so they could be a team that is sort of out there to be got at. So, Gio, what are your predictions for this game?
Let's just say I wouldn't hold my breath on that Calvin Phillips prediction. And by that I mean you will die. No, I think this is quite the opposite of the Man City Arsenal game. I think there will be a lot of goals scored this game. So it'll come down to who I think has the slightly better defense, and I think Newcastle actually has the better defense. I know West Ham is very capable of scoring. They do have a great offensive threat, but their defense has always been sort of their Achilles tendon, to their success. I think this will be a very high scoring game. I think Newcastle again have always had that chip on their shoulder this entire season. Obviously, having such a successful season last year, they're gonna want to end the season off strong and try to gain as many points to jump as many ranks as they possibly can. I think it'll end up in a very high scoring affair, and that high scoring affair, my prediction will be a 3-2 Newcastle win.
Ooh, big shout there. Max, same question to you, but it's crazy to me that 2 of the star midfielders for each of these 2 teams are actually 2 players that started for the Brazil national team, and that's of course Bruno Guimaraes and Lucas Paquetá. So crazy that 2 of the stars of this Brazilian national team are playing for mid-table Premier League clubs. But anyways, Mac, what are your predictions for this game?
The lure of the Premier League money, it's going to attract these types of players. It just makes sense. I'm very much heavily leaning Newcastle, understanding their recent run of form has been a little bit inconsistent, coming back-to-back losses against Chelsea in the league, and of course Man City in the cup. So you may think that you'd be a little bit worried about them, but I think at home at St. James Park, with a lot of returning players coming back, where previous to the international break, you had injury concerns with Timo Livramento as well as Kieran Trippier, who would argue have been 2 standout players of why their defense has been so good this season. So if they're back, along with Anthony Gordon, who played for England, previous international break had also suffered a knock, I think they're rounding into full fitness. Where as we saw towards I would argue, that's the second quarter of this Premier League season. Even the middle chunk, I would say that their injuries and schedule has piled up so much where they couldn't keep up. Whereas now, as bodies are starting to come back and we're seeing this complete squad, you are starting to kind of glean the idea of, okay, if everyone is healthy and they're playing a regular schedule, this is a dangerous team. And I think they're about to turn that corner. So I'm actually quite confident in their ability to go out and get that goal against West Ham, especially that first goal, because that's where I think West Ham, of course, generally speaking, are going to struggle. If they don't score first, I think they very potentially could be cooked, where they have to then expose themselves, because I would argue, again, it's brought them great success in cup competitions, and it's done well for them so far this year. But their defense is so slow, so lethargic, I would argue, where if they do have to come out and expose themselves a little bit, you're going to start asking easy questions about them. So I think that first goal is going to be absolutely vital. But I do believe Newcastle will be able to get that, because even if West Ham are playing such a low block, I do believe in the quality in the final third of a lot of these players. Isak can create a goal or nothing. Anthony Gordon has the ability to do that. Bruno Guimaraes has the ability to be able to make that pass into the final third for his teammates to create those opportunities. So I very much think that, like I said, that they should have enough quality to get past this West Ham team. And for Gio, put a lot of distance between West Ham and that Manchester United, and I think that's where we'll start to see that separation of, okay, who's actually a top four contender, and the West Ham below are the pretenders.
Fair, that's fair. And of course, Newcastle will want to win all 3 points because right behind them are Chelsea, who are trying to get into that top half of the table. So anytime I can get a dig in at Chelsea will be a chance I'll take. But of course, one of the teams that are above both Newcastle and Chelsea is Wolves. They are going to be at Aston Villa though this weekend. The first game between both teams, 1-1 tie at the Molineux Stadium back in October. Aston Villa tied their game against West Ham in the Premier League last time out, but I think they should have. Lucky to have tied that game, whereas Wolves beat Fulham in the Premier League but lost to Coventry in the FA Cup. So this one though, I don't give Wolves much hope considering that all the entire front three, Matheus Cunha, Juan He-Chan, and Pedro Neto will be missing. And apart from John McGinn, who of course will be out for Villa after serving a ban, Villa look like they are back and healthy. So I think it's a big game for Villa. They should be favorites, and I think they will get the win, especially because they want to continue creating space between themselves and Spurs. But more importantly, the next game they have is against City, and in a couple of days after the weekend. So that's midweek next week. And then they have Brentford. Both teams looking to get maximum points for, of course, different reasons. So I think Aston Villa favorites in this game. Mac, do you want to back me up on this one?
Absolutely. I think for them, this is a must win because they're going to have that game against Manchester City coming up where depending on what happens with this Arsenal City result, that could potentially either Man City feeling very comfortable because I would argue after that game, they start to get their schedule ease up quite a bit. They still have to face, I think, Chelsea, if I remember correctly, or Spurs. So it's not a cakewalk, but I would argue of the best teams available in the Premier League, that clears out all the major hurdles that they'll have to be able to go through, or at least majority of them. So I think this matchup for them, Villa, kind of fighting for their lives, not just keeping their distance on Spurs. You're forgetting, Ray, keeping their distance on Manchester United. You got to be a little bit worried about them. They're back, baby. So you got to be able to make sure that you kind of keep that distance. Of course, with them already having a game played an extra game than both Spurs and Manchester United. So realistically, if Spurs win out, Aston Villa win out, they'll be level on points. So these two, I think these two next games are absolutely vital. And if they can pick up 4 points across the two, I think they should come away happy. I think that's a little bit difficult, but I think that this should be, as you highlighted, a must win. And I think almost a for sure win. I apologize. No disrespect to Wolves. I don't see a situation where we'll score more than 2 goals in this game. So if Aston Villa themselves can score 2, which they have the capabilities to do so, they should comfortably walk away with this.
Okay, well, in that case, of course, Gio, tossing to you lastly. Aston Villa likely winners, but Spurs and Man U chasing behind them. What are your expectations for this game?
I mean, it would have to be a miracle in order for I say Wolves to go out there and win this game. So I'm not really expecting much from them. Villa obviously as good of a chance as ever to take advantage of it and really just continue to accumulate points to create that separation. Obviously, Spurs just a couple of weeks ago had a great opportunity, winning 4-0 in Villa. Then following week lose 3-0. So they obviously fumbled there. So Villa will see that as an opportunity just to get away from Spurs, and I think they will take care of business. I think everybody is very hungry to kind of prove naysayers wrong. They were our dark horse team, but to secure a Champions League spot would be huge for the club financially.
Okay, well, we're gonna definitely keep an eye on those games and give you guys our sort of review in our next podcast. So that means we're gonna be concluding our podcast here for today. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well. houseoffooty@hotmail.com is our email. The next time you hear from us will be next week, Tuesday, when we review this weekend's Premier League action. But until then, thank you for joining us, Mac.
Peace out.
Thank you, Gio.
Take care, guys.
See you guys.